Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening for everyone. My name is Paula Martinez. I am representing the National Imaging Facility with some examples from Australia about Australian national platforms to support image research. I would like to start with the National Collaborative Research Infrastructure Strategy, also called NCRIS. Is an Australian national network of world-class research infrastructure projects that support high-quality research. It drives greater innovation in the Australian research sector, and it is a family of different capabilities. Those are divided into different sectors such as energy, medical, and environmental sciences. It is supported by enabling infrastructure such as ABiS, the Australian Research Data Commons, the Australian Academic and Research Network, ARNet, and the Australian Access Federation, AAF. Now, what is the National Imaging Facility? NIF is an unincorporated joint venture. It's funded by the NCRIS, local governments, and host institutions. It is a distributed partnership within 10 nodes around Australia. It has presence in 16 sites. It provides access to high quality instruments, and the backbone of NIF is the network of expertise. I am also representing Microscopy Australia, which is a consortium of 9 university-based microscopy facilities funded by the Australian federal and state governments and participating institutions. Microscopy Australia oversees and provides access to industry users and research users over 3,500 around all these host institutions. For the topic of today, I'd like to address what is the value of data and how do we increase the impact of value of data over time with different activities. The Australian government considers data availability and use as a very important concern and has put together a report with overviews and recommendations about the benefits and costs of making public and private data sets more available. It examines opinions and collections about how to share and release data, considering how to preserve individual privacy and control data use. With this in mind, the NCRIS facilities come up with some challenges that were identified by Microscopy Australia. Microscopy Australia, as many of you, has data management challenges because of the large data production. So it comes in the hundreds of gigabytes or tens of terabytes every year. They consider that it's important to have a common policy framework for data management to provide all the facilities with a good set of recommendations and practices that will consider who owns the data, for how long are we going to retain this data, from when to when are we going to retain this data, what is to be involved in the data management plans, and how do we save minimum standard metadata for finding, accessing, sharing data, and reusing data. Microscopy Australia is in the process of testing and implementing different data repositories such as Omero and 4Seed, and they are looking to find best data management practices, considering as the key important metadata and identifiers for datasets and instruments. This project is also in collaboration with the Australian Characterization Common at Scale project, which is going to be talked about in more detail tomorrow. In respect to NIF and what initiatives NIF is taking around data management best practices and publication and pre-publication of data, we have good examples to share. One of them are the NIF Trusted Data, which is a project from 2017 that has this outcome, the NIF agreed process. So any data that comes from the instrument has to go to the NIF agreed process. It contains minimal metadata that identifies the project ID, the instrument ID with persistent identifiers, and some short metadata. Also, we need to preserve the raw data or the native data that comes out of the instrument, and then make available data converted into one or more open formats. And this has been done in collaboration with 4 different nodes of National Imaging Facility, and it's currently in use. Other initiatives that I would like to go very quickly for you to know about are the Trusted Data Repositories. It's a published paper. Then we have Tissue Stack, which is an online browser and visualization. Imaging.org.au, which forms part of the Australian Atlas of Neurosciences, containing data sets for human and mouse. Then we have 2 very related projects, which are called the Characterization Data Virtual Laboratory and the Characterization Data Enhanced Virtual Laboratory. The first examples that I mentioned have the aim and goal to make data and tools more accessible for the user in a way that they are becoming more consumable. To leverage on the past projects, now there are 2 new projects that NIF and Microscopy Australia are both involved in, and with all the nodes. And those are the Australian Imaging Service and the Australian Characterization Common at Scale. To follow up with the examples that we are doing well, we tend to see this nice picture on all the lead paper that is published, but we tend to forget about the supplemental data and the actual work that has a heavy load that doesn't often come in the publication. So instead of continue doing this, can we do something better? And this is an example recently published, where the publication of a methods for segmentation in the hippocampus has been published, but also there is an open data set to be used in future publications. And that is what makes the value of data more impactful through time, by making data transformation and making it available for others to be using this data set. Another example that works really well comes from the University of Queensland, and the Research Data Manager, also called UQRDM. This has been put up as an exemplar in the European Commission report for turning fair into reality. It links to an ongoing effort from the Research Computing Center, which has developed this application called Camera. It facilitates capture, management, storage, and analysis of data from microscopes, scanners, and sequencers. So it also benefits our users from National Imaging Facility and Microscopy Australia, the nodes that are part of the University of Queensland. The data fabric appears to be a single platform for the user, but it aggregates a lot of technologies such as data repositories and metadata management systems. It is a great example of how a user can obtain data, put a simple data management plan, mount their data into the fabric, and then be able to access supercomputers or the CVL for processing. Then those data sets can mint a DOI to be pre-published and later on to be allocated into a publication as well. And the last example that I'd like to share with you today is part of training activities the National Imaging Facility has led during 2019. We put together this white paper, which is called the 10 Fair Things for Imaging. We had many experts involved in writing this paper from National Imaging Facility, Microscopy Australia, Australian Research Data Commons, and also all the international guests, where we want to clarify what are the terminologies around best data management practices for the researcher. We start by talking about what is fair, what are the publishers, funders saying about data access, trying to encourage data accessibility. Then how do we share data and how do they discover data from reusable data repositories that are public in the imaging community? We also touch upon the importance of sensitive data and what do we need to do for sharing this. And then in the second part, we mention what are persistent identifiers, what persistent identifiers we recommend and how they can use them. How do we describe metadata with a minimum set of fields for describing data? And reusable database practices, licensing your work, and data citation for access and attribution. Those are published in these two links and you're welcome to have a look. With that, I'd like to finish and ask you to stay in touch through the NIF website or the social media links available. Thank you.